And I very quickly had this sort of ambition to become, like most young people who come to London and want to make it big, a trader within a bank. And my unfortunately, my academics and my background, not coming from a top tier university in the UK, or coming from a trading background as an English person, sort of omitted me from that opportunity. And then after about 8 months of being at Morgan McKinley, I had sort of just had enough of being in London. I'd come over in winter. I never had any friends here. I never had any family here. And I just sort of decided it's time to go home. But I still had that like longing and that ambition to get into the world of finance. So I sort of left London with my last paycheck in the bank and gave myself 1 month to go home and say, when I come back, I need to do it over. I need to try it differently. I need to apply different tactics. And I did that. I got back on the plane. I came over again. And the day that I got back, it was just like really sunny. I had a different sort of view on life. Came back, spoke to a friend who had recently come over. Actually, he worked with me at Audi/Volkswagen. I'd convinced him to come over, and the day that he arrived, I was buggering off back home. So I sort of left him in the lurch, but he had managed to find this job at this small foreign exchange company. So I got back and I met up with him and I said, like, what's this company about? And he's like, well, it's an FX company. I was like, what is FX? And he was like, it's foreign exchange. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to apply. And he's like, yeah, do that. And within 3 minutes I had applied, and he wrote me an email back 5 minutes later saying, actually, don't apply. I've only been here 4 days. It'll look embarrassing if I'm already recommending people. And I said, too late. And like 10 minutes later, I got a call. And they said, come in for an interview. And, the rest within World First is history. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded story, but it's a truthful story in terms of how it started and how I got into the world of finance. Within World First itself, I started like right at the bottom. I started as an assistant on an e-commerce trading desk. Very quickly after that, I realized, well, basically my job was to open 1,500 emails, to copy and paste 1,500 email addresses, copy and paste 1,500 templates and customer names and customer balances into these email templates. And after, if that would take me about 2 days, and then you click send so that they all got them at the same time, Tuesday evening. But if your computer broke down, back then, they never had any backup systems or anything. If your computer broke down, you'd have to work into the night. You'd have to work the whole of Wednesday. You'd have to work the whole of Thursday just to get the customer balances out. And after about 3 weeks, I said to myself, I can't do this anymore. It's absolute bullshit. And I walked down to the one IT developer we had in the basement at the very bottom of the Crombie Mews we were working in. Just to put it into perspective, we weren't working in like an office building. We were like working out of a house, which had a basement, and I was working on the first floor. The two directors and founders worked on the top floor. I had walked past his house 3 times before the interview because I didn't actually believe that this is where a business would be run. But anyway, I went down to the one IT developer who's actually a South African, coincidentally. He was passed out on his computer. He was in the basement. He was the only person. And I just sort of said, Paul, I need your help. And within 30 minutes, he had written a script which did my job in 30 seconds. So the 2 or 3 days that I used to do all that work, he had written a script in 30 minutes to take care of that job in 30 seconds, which basically made my role redundant within 3 weeks of working there. And I took that up to my manager at the time, and he took that to the 2 directors, and they're like, this is brilliant. And luckily they could have said, well, you're out. Thanks for doing this. We don't need you anymore. But they were like, because they're entrepreneurial type of people, they said, well, you've obviously got a knack for thinking about automating activities. You've got a knack for speaking to people and understanding how things should be done to try and progress things. et cetera, et cetera. So I was very lucky early on, luck and opportunity at that point. And I carried on in that role for about 3 years until they said to me, look, you've spent a lot of time automating things, you've found ideas, you've figured out solutions to certain things, and they then asked me if I wanted to move into a project manager role, right? And this is where I think the difference between you guys and some of the guys that you interview is in professional project managers will differ to how project management comes out from a FinTech type organization, where in the beginning you are actually called a project manager. You're not. You're basically a jack of all trades. Everything and every accountability is on you. You are responsible for inception of the project, all the business analysis, collecting all the information, seeing it through. And if you don't get it done by a certain date, that's on you. It's not on the stakeholders. It's so it's, while the title is called project manager, it's not in the traditional sense of project manager, but that's the role I got put into. And because that blended across technology and operations, and I had an opportunity a few years later to get into an operations role, they moved me into head of ops, and that then materialized into the COO role for World First for I think about 7 years, and ultimately culminated in us selling the business to Ant Financial in 2019 February for a good sum of money. And I stuck it out with them for a year before I decided to try and do something different with my skill set and move to a slightly smaller business, but still one that's achieving good things, which is global reach. So I started there about 2 months ago. Feels like 20 years after the last things that have happened. But ultimately that is a very long-winded explanation as to how I got to where I am. So apologies if I went on for too long. But
not at all. I mean, I think there's so much sort of nuggets in there. We like to call these things little nuggets, little gems that people can listen to and take lessons from. Certainly, one of the, I mean, this people will have to replay and listen to some of the things you've just said there, because it's really, really interesting, inspiring. One of the things that for me came up, certainly you said, you wanted to make it big on the trading desk. I'm sure that where you are right now, surpasses that. So, and I guess it comes to goals. It doesn't matter really what your specific goal is. If you have that ambition, you always have that ambition. You'll always strive to it. So that's a really important lesson I took from what you just said there. And one of the things that Val and I always discuss on the show, we always allude to it, is automation, tool sets, sort of data analytics. And you kind of mentioned that as well. And looking for opportunities on how to automate. So I think that's another key lesson from your journey thus far. So yeah, I mean, Val, I don't know if you want to add to what Tim said there.
Well, I just think there's so many commonalities when you've worked in the business for so long, and you see these entrepreneurial type project managers coming through that and they go on beyond, and there's a mix of probably not the most ambitious during school, or effectively didn't really do well in school, and I can definitely relate to that, Tim. I didn't really like homework either, and but quite entrepreneurial as well. And it's like you're coming at the problem with a different perspective, and I think that's very valuable in project management now. Is when you have complex programs, even for businesses, if you've got a complex problem, generally those that have been academically trained might not necessarily have the skill set or the experience to solve it. So it's really useful to have people like you around, Tim. And obviously that's done well for your career. In terms of timeline, how long's that time span, that story there? Is that 10 years, 5 years, 20 years?
That's 13 years at the moment. So
That's very impressive.
I started 2008 in March at World First, and I'd been 8 months before that at the recruitment company, and then that lasted until January